Jason sat alone in his small quarters aboard the starship Aurora. The hum of the engines filled the room, a constant reminder that he was far from Earth, far from everything familiar. Outside the viewport, the galaxy stretched endlessly, stars glittering like diamonds scattered across black silk. Yet, despite the beauty, Jason felt a deep, gnawing loneliness. This mission was unlike anything humanity had attempted before. They were explorers, diplomats, and messengers all at once, stepping into a universe that didn't know them, or perhaps didn't care to. He ran his hands over the worn fabric of the chair, staring at the ceiling as memories of the day swirled in his mind. The first encounter with the alien species, the ones the galaxy called the Zetherians, was more intense than he had imagined. Towering beings with silver-blue skin, elongated limbs, and eyes that seemed to pierce through his very soul. The Zetherian Empress herself had appeared on the bridge, her presence commanding yet calm, her aura so powerful that Jason had felt both awe and fear at once. Humanity's first real meeting with such a civilization, and he had been at the center of it. He sighed, letting his thoughts drift. Humans were fragile in the grand scheme of the cosmos, he knew that. They lacked the speed, the strength, the longevity of other species. But there was something else, something unique that he carried in his heart. Courage, curiosity, and the stubbornness to survive no matter the odds. Tonight, though, that courage felt small. He had been trained for emergencies, for diplomacy, for conflict. But nothing could have prepared him for the uncertainty he felt sleeping alone in a room that wasn't really his. Sleep eventually came, though it was restless. Jason's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, protocols, strategies, and the memory of the Empress's gaze, so intelligent and calm, studying him like he was a puzzle she intended to solve. Was it curiosity, judgment, or something else entirely? He couldn't tell. Humans had only begun to understand the galaxy's complexity, and yet here he was, caught in it, a single human among beings who had mastered the stars long before Earth had even formed cities. Hours passed. Stars outside his window shifted, and the soft glow of distant suns painted the room in faint silver light. Jason's breathing slowed, his body sinking deeper into the thin mattress, and for a moment he forgot fear, forgot responsibility. Just for a few minutes he allowed himself to be a man. Not a soldier, not a diplomat, not a representative of humanity, but simply Jason, alone, yet dreaming. Then something stirred in his mind, a faint sense that the night held more than just silence. He shrugged it off, thinking it was fatigue, the product of long days and longer nights. Still, a tiny spark of anticipation lingered deep in the pit of his stomach. He did not know that this spark would soon ignite into something beyond imagination. Somewhere in the galaxy, the Empress of the Zetherians moved in ways unknown to him. She was powerful, intelligent, and ancient, yet something about fate or chance had drawn her to him. The universe, it seemed, had a strange sense of humor, or perhaps a mysterious way of teaching lessons. And tonight that lesson was about to begin, in a way that Jason could never have predicted. As he drifted deeper into sleep, the stars outside seemed to pulse gently, as if they knew what was coming. Jason had no idea that when he woke, the galaxy would no longer feel distant. The universe would feel alive, urgent, and incredibly close. He would not wake alone. He would wake with a being whose presence could challenge everything he had ever known. And in that moment, humanity itself might find its place among the stars. Sleep finally claimed him fully, soft and heavy, unaware that the quiet night was merely the calm before a storm that would change his life, and the life of humanity, forever. Jason awoke slowly, the soft hum of the ship still vibrating through the walls. For a moment he thought he was still dreaming. The room was dim, bathed in the gentle glow of the stars outside the viewport, but then he felt something warm and weighty against his chest. His eyes snapped open, he froze. His heart raced faster than ever. Cradled in his arms was the Zetherian Empress herself, the same being whose presence had once filled him with awe and fear. Her silvery skin shimmered faintly in the soft light, her hair like tendrils floating around her delicate face. Her large opalescent eyes, deep and intelligent, looked straight at him, and in that gaze Jason felt the strangest mixture of wonder, disbelief, and fear. How did this happen? He whispered, his voice barely audible. The words sounded foreign even to him, tremulous with shock. The Empress tilted her head, a slow and deliberate movement as if she were studying him not just as a human but as something more, something rare and unpredictable. Then she spoke. Her voice was melodic, soft, yet it carried a weight that seemed to resonate in his chest. "You are trusted," she said, the translator in his ear making sense of the alien syllables. Jason blinked, unsure whether he should feel honored or terrified. Humans were small, fragile creatures compared to her species, and yet here he was, holding a being who commanded entire worlds. His mind spun. How had she ended up here? Was it a mistake, a trap, or some impossible twist of fate? He remembered the stories, the warnings from Fleet Command, tales of humans being crushed by alien politics or mistaken hostility. And yet she was calm, serene, and somehow vulnerable. For a brief, breathtaking moment, Jason saw not the empress of a powerful alien empire, but a being who needed care, attention, and perhaps even protection. The thought struck him hard. Humanity, so small and underestimated, might actually have a role in this vast universe, not through firepower, not through technology alone, but through courage, empathy, and the willingness to step forward when everything seemed impossible. Jason swallowed, his fingers tightening gently around her as if to anchor himself to reality. Time seemed to slow. The stars outside the viewport didn't move, yet the air was charged with an unseen energy. Jason could feel it, the universe itself holding its breath. The Empress shifted slightly, resting her head against his chest. Her touch was feather-light, yet it sent an electric shiver down his spine. He realized she was testing him, observing how he would respond, not with words but with action. He took a deep, steadying breath. I'll protect you," he said, though the words sounded small against the weight of their situation. Yet even as he spoke, he felt something inside him ignite, a mixture of determination, fear, and awe. He was just one human, one fragile mortal human, and yet, in this moment, he felt the potential for something far greater than himself. The Empress's gaze softened slightly, a subtle acknowledgement that she had noticed his resolve. For Jason, it was enough. Small as humans were, this moment reminded him of their greatest strength, their ability to surprise, to endure, to rise when the odds were stacked impossibly high. Somewhere deep in the galaxy, destiny was unfolding. Jason did not know what trials awaited him, what dangers lurked beyond the walls of the ship. But he did know this. The quiet life he had once known was gone. Humanity had a chance to shine through him, and the Empress, majestic, terrifying, and yet fragile, was now inexplicably connected to his fate. Jason's chest rose and fell steadily as he adjusted his hold, careful not to startle her. The hum of the ship felt louder now, more insistent. Outside, the stars continued to glimmer. And inside, Jason felt the first stirrings of courage that would define not just his night, but the future of humanity among the stars. He was awake, and he was no longer alone. Jason sat on the edge of the bunk, the Empress still cradled in his arms. The soft hum of the starship surrounded them like a protective cocoon, yet his mind raced with questions he could not answer. How had this come to be? Why had she trusted him? And most importantly, what dangers lurked outside this small, fragile room? For a moment, he simply looked at her. The Empress's skin shimmered softly in the pale light, her expression serene yet unreadable. Humans had always feared what they could not understand, and she was the very embodiment of the unknown. Yet there was something gentle in her presence, a quiet grace that contrasted sharply with the stories he had heard of her power. She was an empress, a ruler of countless worlds, but here in this small room, she seemed almost human. Jason's fingers traced a careful line along her arm, and she did not flinch. The realization struck him like a sudden wave. She trusted him. A creature so vast, so powerful, had placed her safety in the hands of a single human. The weight of that responsibility settled heavily on his chest, and he swallowed hard, feeling both pride and fear. Humans were fragile, yes, but perhaps this fragility was part of their strength. Their hearts, their empathy, their courage in the face of danger. That was something other species could not predict. Yet fear lingered. He could not ignore it. Outside the walls of the ship, the galaxy was unpredictable. There were forces that would see her as a weapon, a prize, or a threat. Every choice he made now carried consequences, not only for himself, but for humanity itself. The Empress shifted slightly in his arms, her gaze meeting his. In that instant, Jason understood that she was aware of the stakes. She was not just a passive presence. She was testing him, measuring the limits of his courage and resolve. He swallowed again, trying to steady his racing heart. I don't know how to do this, he admitted softly. His voice trembled, honest and raw. I've never protected anyone like you before. The Empress's eyes softened, a faint ripple of emotion crossing her face. She reached out, her hand barely brushing his cheek, and he felt a warmth that seemed impossible for someone so alien. In that touch, he sensed understanding. She did not need words to communicate, for her presence alone spoke volumes. She trusted him, and that trust was a bridge between their worlds. Jason realized then that fear and courage could coexist. He could be terrified and yet still act. Humanity had survived for centuries because of that delicate balance. Small, fragile humans had faced impossible odds before, and somehow they had endured. Now, in this quiet room on a distant ship, that same endurance would be tested again. Minutes passed in silence. The ship's hum filled the gaps where words could not reach. Jason felt a strange calm begin to settle over him. A sense that despite the unknown, they were not alone in this moment. He was holding an Empress, yes, but more than that. He was holding hope, the hope that humans could matter, that they could rise to meet challenges no one believed they could. He tightened his hold slightly, careful not to harm her, yet firm enough to anchor both of them in this uncertain reality. The Empress tilted her head, observing him as if she could see into his soul. Jason felt an almost overwhelming mixture of awe and responsibility. He was just one man, yet he carried the weight of two species on his shoulders tonight. Finally, he spoke again, his voice steadier this time. I don't know what comes next, he said, but I won't let anything happen to you, not while I'm here. The Empress's gaze lingered on him for a long moment, and then ever so slightly a smile touched her lips. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but to Jason it meant everything. Humanity might be small, fragile and untested, but in that smile, he saw the first acknowledgement of something greater, a spark of trust, a recognition of courage, and perhaps the first step toward an alliance that could change the galaxy. For the first time that night, Jason allowed himself to hope. He was terrified, yes, but not powerless, and in that fragile balance between fear and courage, he realized the truth. Humans might be small, but their hearts could shine brighter than any star. He held the Empress close, letting the quiet strength of that moment sink in. Outside the room, the galaxy waited, and Jason knew that soon he would have to face it, together with her and with humanity behind him. The quiet of the ship did not last. Jason had barely adjusted to the strange calm of holding the Empress when alarms blared through the corridors. Red lights flashed, painting the room in harsh, urgent streaks. The ship's sensors had detected incoming Zetherian drones, but these were not friendly escorts. They were warriors sent to retrieve their Empress by force. Jason's heart pounded like a drum. He tightened his hold on the Empress instinctively, her body leaning against his chest as if sensing his fear. She looked up at him, her eyes calm but alert. In that gaze, Jason felt both challenge and trust. She expected him to act, to make decisions no human had ever faced. He barely had time to think. We need to move, he said, his voice firmer than he felt. The Empress nodded slightly, understanding without words. She rose carefully in his arms, her weight surprisingly light, and together they slipped into the narrow corridors of the ship. Jason's mind raced. Every twist of the hall, every corner they passed could hide a drone. One wrong move, one misstep, and the galaxy could witness the fall of the human species at the hands of a single mistake. The corridors echoed with the hum of approaching machines. Jason's breathing grew shallow, but he forced himself to stay calm. He had trained for emergencies, but nothing in training prepared him for this, carrying the ruler of an entire civilization while running for their lives. His muscles ached, his arms burned, but he refused to falter. He could feel the Empress's trust pressing against him like a second heartbeat, a reminder that failure was not an option. As they rounded a corner, a squad of drones appeared, blocking the path. Their sleek metallic bodies glinted under the red warning lights, and their weapons were already aimed. Jason's stomach twisted. He could not fight them in a conventional way. He had no advanced weaponry capable of matching the drone's firepower. Yet retreat was not an option. He took a deep breath, forcing his fear into determination. Move carefully, he whispered to the Empress, though she did not need the warning. She had faced threats far greater than this, yet here she was, trusting him to navigate a situation that could determine the fate of both their species. Jason ducked and rolled, keeping her safely cradled, using every narrow passage to their advantage. The drones pursued relentlessly, but Jason's quick thinking allowed them to slip past hazards, bulkheads, and maintenance shafts that no machine could anticipate. Despite the danger, Jason could not help but notice small moments that reminded him of the Empress's humanity. Her eyes followed his every move, her subtle movements showing a delicate grace even in the midst of peril. He realized that her strength was not just in her power or authority, it was in her intelligence, her adaptability, and her ability to trust someone so vastly different from herself. Hours or maybe only minutes passed in tense silence as they maneuvered through the ship. Every shadow, every turn was a test of his courage. Yet through it all, Jason felt an unspoken bond growing between them. The Empress did not speak, but her presence was a steady reassurance. He felt her trust as a tangible force, guiding him when his own fear threatened to overwhelm him. Finally, they reached a secure chamber, a place the ship's crew rarely entered. Jason carefully set the Empress down, his body trembling with exhaustion. She looked at him, her large eyes reflecting the dim emergency lights. Then, in a voice softer than the alarms outside, she said, "You are brave. Your species has potential." Jason swallowed hard, relief and pride washing over him in equal measure. Humans were small and fragile, yes, but this moment had shown him their true power: courage, ingenuity, and an unbreakable spirit. He realized then that the galaxy might underestimate humanity, but he would not. Not tonight. Even as he caught his breath, Jason knew the night was far from over. Drones would return, dangers would persist, and the universe would continue to test him. Yet something had shifted. He was no longer just a human running from a threat. He was a protector, a symbol of humanity's potential, and the Empress's trust had become a bridge between two worlds. And in that realization, Jason felt something stir deep inside. Hope. Not just for himself, but for all of humanity. Jason looked around the secure chamber, catching his breath. The alarms outside still echoed faintly, but for now they had a moment of quiet. He glanced at the Empress, who stood gracefully despite the exhaustion she must feel. Her eyes met his, not with fear, but with expectation. She trusted him, and that trust was both a weight and a spark. It reminded him why humanity, though small and fragile, could rise to the occasion when it mattered most. He moved toward the communication panel, thinking of the crew. They had trained for emergencies, but none of them had faced a situation like this. A single human protecting the ruler of an alien empire, while the galaxy seemed to collapse around them. Jason's heart pounded with urgency. He needed to convince them that this was not just a rescue mission. It was humanity's chance to show its value, its courage, and its determination. "Crew," he spoke into the comm, his voice steady despite the tension. "Listen carefully. The Empress is with me. She trusts us, and now we have to trust each other. This is our chance to show the galaxy what humans can do, not with weapons alone, but with courage, strategy, and heart." There was a brief pause. Then, one by one, voices responded, shaky at first, but growing stronger. They understood the stakes, and in that understanding, Jason saw the first signs of hope. Human ingenuity was unpredictable, yes, but tonight it could make the impossible possible. Together, they devised a plan. Jason would guide the Empress to the ship's central command, where the crew could coordinate a safe route out of enemy territory. Every corridor, every hatch, and every defensive system would be used strategically. The drones outside were powerful, but humans had something the machines could not predict: creativity, unpredictability, and courage, fueled by hope. The journey began. Jason led the Empress through narrow corridors, using shadows and small maintenance shafts to avoid detection. Every step was calculated, every decision a test of instinct. His heart raced, but he kept his breathing steady, anchoring himself with the thought that the Empress's life, and the trust of her entire civilization, depended on him. At one point, a squad of drones appeared, blocking their path. Jason felt a surge of fear, but he did not hesitate. He guided the Empress behind a structural panel, then used a small manual override to lock the corridor temporarily. The drones hesitated, confused by human improvisation, and in that brief moment, they moved forward. Jason's heart pounded with both relief and pride. Humans were small, yes, but their minds and hearts could be mighty when tested. As they progressed, Jason noticed small things about the Empress, tiny gestures that revealed her trust and curiosity. She observed the humans' tactics closely, tilting her head when Jason explained a maneuver or paused near a security console. He realized then that she was not only being protected, but also learning from them. Humanity, so underestimated, was leaving a mark. On a species that had ruled the stars for centuries, hours seemed to pass in a blur, yet with each step, Jason felt the growing connection between them. The Empress's trust gave him strength, and his courage reassured her that her decision to leave her palace had not been in vain. Humans might be fragile, but they could endure, adapt, and rise above fear when it mattered most. Finally, they reached the central command chamber. The crew was ready, coordinating defenses and planning an escape route that leveraged both human creativity and the ship's advanced technology. The Empress's eyes glowed faintly as she looked at Jason, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had formed during this perilous journey. Jason allowed himself a moment to breathe, exhaustion heavy in his limbs, but his heart lighter than it had been in hours. Humanity had shined tonight, not through brute strength or dominance, but through courage, ingenuity, and the capacity to protect what mattered most. The Empress stepped forward, placing her hand lightly on Jason's shoulder. Her voice was calm, melodic, and filled with approval. "Your species has strength I did not expect. You are remarkable." Jason smiled, feeling a warmth spread through him. Small and fragile, humans might be, but their hearts, their courage, and their determination could change the course of the galaxy. And tonight, he had seen it with his own eyes. For the first time, Jason realized that humanity was not just surviving in the universe. They could shine, even in the darkest moments. And as he stood beside the Empress, he knew this was only the beginning. The enemy drones were relentless. Even with the crew coordinating from the command center, Jason knew the danger had not passed. Every corridor, every vent, and every hatch could conceal a threat. The galaxy had not yet witnessed the full power of humanity, and tonight it would. Jason held the Empress's hand lightly as they moved through the ship's interior. Her presence was calm, almost regal, but Jason could feel the tension beneath it. She trusted him, and that trust was heavier than any weapon he had ever carried. The weight of responsibility pressed on his shoulders, but he let it drive him instead of breaking him. Every step, every choice mattered, not just for their lives, but for the reputation of humanity across the stars. A sudden alarm cut through the tense silence. A massive drone was approaching, larger and faster than the rest. Jason's stomach twisted. This one could not be outsmarted with trickery alone. The Empress's eyes widened slightly, just enough for Jason to see that even she, with all her power and experience, understood the danger they faced. He swallowed his fear and focused. Humans were fragile, yes, but they were also resilient. He scanned the corridor quickly, searching for anything he could use. Pipes, maintenance panels, emergency overrides, all could become tools. He whispered instructions to the crew, guiding them to prepare traps and distractions. Every human mind working together, every small action perfectly timed, became a force the drones did not anticipate. The massive drone entered the corridor, its metal frame gleaming ominously. Jason's heart pounded like a drum. The Empress clung to him instinctively, her trust a tangible force that pushed him forward. He made a split-second decision, ducking behind a panel and luring the drone toward a concealed chamber. The crew triggered the trap and the massive machine crashed into the makeshift barrier. Momentarily stunned, Jason and the Empress moved quickly, hearts racing, adrenaline surging. In that intense moment, Jason realized something profound. Humanity's strength was not in brute force. It was in courage, in creativity, and in the refusal to give up, even when everything seemed lost. He had seen it in his crew and himself, and now he saw it reflected in the Empress's eyes. She was learning, observing, and perhaps beginning to understand that humans, fragile as they seemed, could be extraordinary. Hours, or maybe only minutes, passed in a blur of tense maneuvers, calculated risks, and moments where one wrong step could have ended everything. Yet Jason never faltered. He held the Empress, guided the crew, and led the way through danger with unwavering focus. Every challenge strengthened his resolve. Every close encounter deepened the bond between him and the alien ruler he protected. Finally, They reached a wide observation deck, a place where the stars themselves seemed close enough to touch. Jason set the Empress down carefully, his body trembling with exhaustion. The drones were temporarily held back, the crew coordinating the final defensive measures. He looked at her, and in that moment, something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of shared struggle, of trust, and of the courage that had carried them through the darkest moments. The Empress's voice was soft, melodic, yet carried the weight of authority. You have shown the strength of your species, not through power alone, but through heart, courage, and ingenuity. You are remarkable. Jason felt a warmth he could not describe. Humans were small and fragile, yes, but their hearts could shine brighter than the stars. In protecting her, in rising to the challenge, he had seen humanity's potential reflected back at him. The galaxy might underestimate them, but tonight, they had proven that courage and determination could shape destiny. As he looked out at the vast expanse of space, the Empress beside him, Jason understood something vital. Humanity's journey was only beginning. Their fragility was not a weakness, it was a source of strength, because it made their courage meaningful. And in that realization, Jason felt hope, pride, and an unshakable sense of purpose. The universe was vast, unpredictable, and often dangerous. Yet for the first time, Jason felt certain that humans, small and fragile as they seemed, could rise to meet it and shine. The battle had ended, but the silence that followed was not peaceful. It was heavy, filled with the weight of what had been survived and what had been learned. Jason stood on the observation deck, the Empress beside him, both of them catching their breath as the stars stretched endlessly beyond the glass. The galaxy seemed quiet, but he knew it was only a temporary reprieve. Threats and challenges would come again, as they always did. Yet something had changed. He was no longer just a human among the stars. He had carried the Empress, guided the crew, and faced danger head-on. Humanity, small and fragile, had proven its worth, not through superior technology or numbers, but through courage, ingenuity, and the refusal to give up. Jason felt a deep pride swelling inside him, a pride not just for himself, but for the entire species he represented. The Empress turned to him, her large opalescent eyes reflecting the distant suns. There was no fear in them now, only acknowledgement, respect, and something more subtle. Perhaps trust that had become friendship, or admiration for a species she had once underestimated. Her voice was soft, melodic, and deliberate, carrying the weight of centuries of authority. You have shown me the heart of your species. Humanity is remarkable. Do not underestimate yourselves. Jason swallowed hard, emotions swirling in his chest. His hands still shook slightly from exhaustion and adrenaline, but there was something steadier now. A sense of purpose. A sense that what he had done mattered beyond himself. Humanity might be small, but in moments like this, they were capable of extraordinary courage. The Empress's trust was a gift, but also a responsibility, and he would not take it lightly. He looked around the observation deck at his crew, exhausted but alive, their faces reflecting the same awe and determination he felt. Humans were fragile, yes, but they had heart. They had fought not for glory, but because it was right. In that, Jason realized, lay their true strength. Courage was not the absence of fear. It was acting despite it. Humanity had shined tonight, and the universe had noticed. The Empress stepped closer, her hand brushing lightly against his chest, a gesture so simple yet so profound that it made his heart leap. Jason realized in that moment that connections could transcend worlds, species, and power. Trust, empathy, and courage could form bonds stronger than any alliance written on paper or enforced by fleets. Humanity had not only survived tonight, they had been seen, recognized, and valued. Jason's mind drifted briefly to Earth, to the small blue planet spinning quietly in the void. He imagined the people there, unaware of the events unfolding in the far reaches of space. Perhaps one day, humanity would understand how far their courage could reach. Perhaps one day the galaxy would know that even the smallest species could rise to greatness. The Empress's voice cut softly through his thoughts. I will return to my people. They will know that humans are worthy allies, that you are worthy. Jason nodded, feeling a surge of emotion. Words seemed inadequate, but his heart spoke clearly. He had witnessed humanity's potential, and he knew that it could change the course of the galaxy. The fragile humans of Earth had done something extraordinary tonight, and he had been at the center of it. guiding them and learning from them in return. As the stars outside shimmered, Jason allowed himself a small, exhausted smile. He had fallen asleep alone, uncertain and fearful. He had awoken with the Empress in his arms, facing dangers that could have ended everything. And now, after the trials, after the tests of courage and heart, he understood something vital. Humanity's true power was not in might or speed, but in spirit. The Empress placed her hand on his shoulder once more, a final, silent acknowledgement. Jason returned her gaze steadily. He did not know what the future held, but he knew this. Humans might be small, fragile, and untested,